Okay, so today's topic is very important and very uh, entertaining. We are going to talk about password cracking. So let's first talk about how we can crack it and how we should store it. Okay, so in the past, like at the end of 1990s and at the beginning of 2000s, we had a lot of web pages where users can create accounts. Okay, these can be like forums where you can talk to other people, or e-shopping web pages where you create an account and put your credit card information and buy some stuff. But the problem was that those web pages actually designed in such a way that when you create an account, they kept your username, email address, and password in a database table. But almost every database leaks at least once in their lifetime. And all of those passwords then leaks. So all of those web pages from 1990s and at the beginning of 2000s actually got closed at the beginning of 2000s because they leaked almost everybody's password. And the problem is that people keep using the same password for every web page. So when your password at a very unimportant web page leaks, maybe you are using the same password for your Gmail account. So your Gmail account gets breached. And if you lose Gmail account, actually you lose almost everything, right? Because then if you, for instance, have a Twitter account, the attacker says that I forgot my password, so they send an email to your Gmail account to renew it and so on and so forth. So this is why two-factor authentication and so on are important these days. So if I cannot store these passwords as a plain text on the database, what can I do? So one good idea is to use a hash function because it is a one-way function. So instead of putting the password, you calculate the hash of it and store the hash of it, okay? So this is good enough because whenever I want to log in, I will provide my password. They will hash it and check if it matches with the one at the database. So if it matches, then you are allowed to log in. But if it doesn't match, then this means that your password is wrong. This is good because when the database leaks, hash of your password leaks. And we said that hash function is a one-way function, right? Because it is preimage resistant. So by looking at the hash, they cannot know what your password is. So this is the good thing. Okay. So leakage of the database should not leak the passwords. Yes. Hence, the hash function should be preimage resistant. So this is, of course, not enough. We will see why this is not enough. But let's go with this first. If I'm just putting the hash of passwords in the database, what can the attacker do? Actually, there are two things they can do: dictionary attack or exhaustive search attack. Okay, so before moving on, actually, at this point, you might say that how can I know the service I'm using calculates the hash of my passwords or not? So in other words, how can I know how they store my password? The answer is actually you cannot know the exact algorithm if they don't explain it. But one way to check if they're storing as a plain text or not is to press the button that I forgot my password. So when you click it, if they send you your password back, this means that they are keeping it as a plain text. But if they send an email to as a link to recreate your password, this means that they don't know your password too. They are keeping the hash of it. Unfortunately, there are many governmental web pages. They still, when you click, I forgot my password, they send your password to you. This means that they are kept as a plain text. Okay. Yeah, I mentioned that if I only hash it, then the attacker can perform a dictionary attack or an exhaustive search attack. So let's start with the dictionary attack. So this is actually what we want to do. But President's office doesn't allow me to throw books to students. So this is why we cannot do it. So this is not how we can perform the dictionary attack, but it works like this. You pre-compute the hashes of common words, common terms, and you combine them with numbers, symbols, etc. So you create a very huge list of passwords. Okay. Here, at this point, you haven't captured anything at all. Okay. You are hoping that in the future you are going to perform an attack, so you create a dictionary. And you say that, okay, most probably the people don't know cryptography enough. So you say that, okay, people will take the passwords and calculate MD5 of it and put it in the database. So you're hoping that in the future you will get a database where you will have MD5 hashes or sometimes SHA-1 hashes. Of course, we suggest always non-broken algorithms like SHA-2, but people still keep using MD5. So with this knowledge, you actually created this list of passwords. Then you calculate MD5 of them, or SHA-1 of all of these passwords. So you end up with a huge list of hashes. Then you sort them. Sorting algorithms are really fast, so you sort them. This is good because when the database leaks, what you do is as follows. You have a list of hashes of the passwords you chose by yourself. Like, you get two words from a dictionary, make one of the characters capital, put a number, put a special character, and so on, and you calculated the hashes of this. So you have a huge list of hashes, and database leaks, and you get the hashes of every user. So maybe that database had 1 million users, but you created maybe 10 billion of passwords. You just compare these two tables and see if there are any matches. Because if there's any match, this means that you already know the passwords and you break that account. So this is how the dictionary attack works. So, and actually this works, by the way. People still keep only the hashes of a password, which is not a good idea. Okay. So since a dictionary attack can break this kind of systems, I mean, in order to avoid this kind of attack, you have to create a random password. But, memorizing a random password is harder, so not everybody do that, right? This is the problem. So since we cannot force users to choose random looking passwords, as the designer, what you can do is as follows. You can take a countermeasure by using salts. So instead of hashing the password, what you do is as follows. When somebody creates a password, you randomly generate a salt at that instant and concatenate it to the end of the password. This is generally 32 bits, but you can increase. So then take the hash of it and put it in the database. This is good because if two people, for instance, creating a Facebook account, so both of them choose the same password, but since salt is random value, at that instant, Facebook randomly generates a salt value and concatenates it to the end of the password of these users. So although they both have the same password, their salt values will be different, so the hashes will be different. So even with the people with the same password will not appear as the same passwords at the hashes. So this is good because this dictionary will no longer work here, right? Because you are concatenating 32-bit random value here, and you didn't create your dictionary for that case, right? Of course, you can say that, okay, I can create a dictionary for every possible salt, right? Because I have a huge list of passwords in my dictionary. I can add the salt as, for instance, all zeros as 32 bits, then increment it with 1 and so on. But this means that if your dictionary is 1 terabyte, cloning it for every salt means that you need 2 to the 32 terabytes, which you don't have the storage space. So dictionary attack actually becomes invalid at this point. Okay, so this is why we insist that you should create a salt. But don't forget that salt is not a hidden value. I mean, it is not secret. I mean, of course, I cannot ask Facebook what my salt value is. They will not tell me. But when the database leaks, in the database, the hash of this whole thing will be there together with salt. So when the database leaks, salt value also leaks, okay? This is important because salt will not be hidden at that instant. Also, some people also mistake this idea. We say that put a salt, so they randomly generate a salt value and hard code it in the software and use the same salt for everybody, which is the worst idea that you can do, okay? Because in that scenario, everybody is using the same salt, so the dictionary attack will work there. You will create your dictionary for that salt, and that will be the end of it. And I really heard people who store it like this in critical places, okay? So salt should be different for everybody and should be a random value, okay? Yes, attacker has to generate tables for every salt, which is not practical. So we can get rid of the dictionary attacks like this. So if dictionary attacks doesn't work, what the attacker can do? And the attacker can do exhaustive search, which means try every possible password, right? You start with, for instance, I mean, I don't know if the system would allow you to create a password with a 1 character, but you can start because shorter passwords means that there are a small number of passwords, so you can try one by one. But question is, what my password length so that I will be secure, right? Because when you Google it, it's always said that 8-character passwords are secure, and you will realize that in your daily life you always create, sometimes system forces you to choose an 8-character password and doesn't allow you to choose anything longer, because generally 8 characters, 64 bits, and they prefer it like that. But so the question is, are the 8-character passwords are secure? Some blog posts will tell you that they are secure because they were written 10 years ago and they were considering the power of the CPUs. But now we have GPUs, and the dedicated attacker can use FPGAs and even maybe, turn them into ASICs and, had a very huge, have a huge computational power where they can check many passwords in a small amount of time. So let's check if the ID is correct, because people are forcing us to use 8-character passwords, and they don't allow us to use only small letters, right? Because English alphabet has 26 letters. So maybe you would like to prefer to have an 8-character password with all small letters. But if you do it, this is the number of different passwords one can create, okay? Because 26 to the 8, 26 small characters we have, letters, and we are trying to create an 8-character password. So this is the number of passwords that you can create. So if you write it as the power of 2, it is 2 to the 37.6. So question is, if I create such a password, add a salt to it and then calculate the hash of it, when the database leaks, I get this hash, and I, for some reason, want to attack people who choose only small letters, okay? So all I need to do, create all of these passwords, calculate their hashes, and check if it matches that one, right? So I have to perform 2 to the 37 hashing operations as the attacker. So the question is, how long does it take for me to perform 2 to the 37 hash operations? The thing is that hashing is really fast, and GPUs are really fantastic these days. We have thousands of cores. So actually, at the newest GPU, this will take 1 second. Sorry to say that, but this is not that hard. Okay, can be as small as 1 second. So this is why when we create an account, they forces us to use a capital letter too, right? They prevent us to use all small letters. So if we only do that, if we only use small and capital letters, this is the space that we can use. We have 52 characters, and we are going to choose an 8-character password. So yes, now the space increased. The attacker has to perform more hashes. But if I can do this in 1 second, this is just 2 to the 8 more, which is like, 4 minutes. So this is not that hard either. So if I add also numbers, now my character space is 62. So it increases just a little bit more, which is not that much of a problem. For this reason, they are forcing us to use a special character, right? This is why almost everybody puts an exclamation mark at the end of their password, right? Because they force us to. But you have like 94 printable characters on your keyboard in the ASCII table. So now the space is 94 to the 8. Yes, a lot higher compared to this. But let's see how long it will take for me to do it. For instance, if I can do it in 1 second, this means that I need 2 to the 15 seconds to break this, right? So the question is, 2 to the 15 seconds, is it long or not? How many years will it take, right? But in a year, we have almost 2 to the 25 seconds. So 2 to the 15 seconds you can do it in days. But more importantly, if you have 2 to the 15 GPUs, which is like 32,000, I guess, right? Then you can do it in 1 second. So the gamers on the internet can get around and capture all of these passwords in less than a second. So this is not that much of a problem. So as you can see, 8 characters are not enough if you do it like this. So you can force them to use 9 characters. Then you know you will increase this 8 to 9. Then you recalculate these numbers. You will see that it is also within reach. So question is how long they should be, right? So at some point, maybe you can calculate and say that, okay, 12 characters are enough. But you cannot force users to choose 12-character passwords, right? Because then it will be very hard to memorize. So instead of choosing random 12 characters, they will combine a few words, then put a number to it and so on. So it will be still easier to break because we can search the space in a clever way. For example, users select easy to remember short passwords. They almost never use more than 2 special characters. Actually, what everybody does, since we are forcing them to use all of these, start with a capital letter, continue with small letters, then put a single number at the end, then put a single special character at the end. And these spaces then becomes really small if you only attack that kind of passwords. Okay. So, as you can see, it doesn't work. I cannot force users to choose 15-character passwords. So what can I do? I can actually slow down the attacker. But this is kind of hard because I cannot force them to not to buy hardware, right? Because they will buy their GPU, so they have the computational power. So I cannot limit their computational power, but I can slow down the hashing operation so that this way they can check less number of passwords in a second. So this is the good idea. So let's do it. This is the countermeasure we are going to do. Slow down the hash computation speed. Instead of using the hash value of a password, repeatedly use the hash output as the hash input. So this means that, recall that we had the password, we created a salt, concatenated to the end, calculate the hash of it, and instead of putting this hash value to the database, take this as the input and put the hash function again and again and again. Repeat this thousands of times. For instance, maybe 8,192 times. Because if you do it, for instance, for this many times, a password that an attacker can capture in a single day will now require 8,000 days, right? Because you're slowing down the speed 8,000 times. But this also slows down our login speed, right? Because now when I provide my password to the Facebook, they have to calculate hash of it thousands of times. But this actually happens in milliseconds because they are going to just hash for a single password, but the attacker have to hash every candidate password. This is why it will be a lot harder for them, but not for us to log in. So this is actually how you should do it. Okay. I will show some examples, but before moving on, let's talk about password-based key derivation, which is generally used in storing passwords. So this is a good idea. As I mentioned before, we need keys, but generally a user cannot choose their AES 256-bit key, right? Because then you have to press randomly 0 or 1 for 256 times. So easier thing will be to generate that key from your password. Okay. So how can you do it? This algorithm actually takes these inputs, your password, salt, a pseudo-random function, for instance, a hash function. C will be the number of how many times that you repeat the pseudo-random function. And dklen is the length of the key that you require after this process. For instance, if you are going to use AES 256, this will be 256. But if you are going to use RSA 3072, this means that you need a 3072-bit secret key. So you write 3072 to here. So, as I mentioned, this is for pseudo-random function of 2 parameters. C is the number of iterations that you desire. This is your key length, and dk is the generated derived key. So the algorithm works like this. It generates TIs and concatenates them. So This way you can generate as long as you want the key you need, okay? And these TIs are actually generated from your password, salt, number of iterations, and this I value from here. So F is the concatenation of C iterations of chained pseudo-random functions. So this way you actually XOR UIs, and you calculate these UIs as follows. You have the password, your salt value, and you concatenate it to this I value, which is, here I is 1, okay? And int 32b is just the 32-bit integer I as the big ending. So this way you are changing the salt at every step and so on, okay? So this way at the end of the day you generate a secret key. Okay, let's see how this is important for us, okay? Think about your modems or routers at home. If you use WPA2, recall that when you bought it, you chose an SSID and a passphrase, right? This is the passphrase you give to your friends when they come to your home. But actually, your SSID is used as a salt to your passphrase, and this concatenated value is fed to HMAC SHA-1, and this calculation is repeated 4096 times. And at the end, it generates 256-bit value, which you are going to use as AES 256-bit key. This is how your mobile phone and your laptop actually communicates to the modem at your home. This is the whole idea. So if you choose a weak password, your next door neighbor can try all of them and capture your passphrase from here, because they know the salt value, which is the SSID, which you broadcast anyway, right? So this 4000 number is kind of small, because let me show another example. WINRAR uses 2 to the 15, which is 32,000, more than 32,000. And instead of SHA-1, WINRAR uses SHA-256. Okay. So our analysis shows that if you're going to use WINRAR or similar algorithms like this, your password should be longer than 8 characters. So we, in the past, we used an old GPU. It was new at that time, of course. And we wanted to check how many characters are good for WINRAR password. So WINRAR actually is a compression algorithm, I know, but if you choose a password, what WINRAR does is, first it compresses your file, then encrypts it with AES 256. And that key is generated from here, okay? This function, but this time you put it this SHA-256, and here you write this number, okay? And SSID, of course, in that sense, is the salt value that is randomly generated at the time. So if you only use numbers as your password, but if you keep it long, like 13 characters, it takes like 20 years for this GPU to break it. So you might say that, okay, this is good, nobody will do it for 20 years. But the thing is that if you have 20 GPUs, this will take 1 year, right? And also this is a very old GPU. Nowadays we have RTX 4090. So this number will be like a few years for that GPU. So this is not a good idea. This is why, increasing the character space is a good idea. But if you choose 6-character passwords where you only use small letters, capital letters, and numbers, it takes 41 days for us to break with this GPU. If you increase the character length to 7, it takes 7 years. If you increase it to 8 characters, it takes 439 years. Now, if you put all of the printable characters for 6 character length, as you can see, from 41 days, it increases to 1.5 years. And for 7 character length passwords, from 7 years, it increases to this. And to this, it increases to this. So it looks like that using special characters are good. But again, this number is not that large, because you might say that, okay, 13,000 years is actually large. But this means that, again, this is an old GPU. With new GPUs, this number will be maybe 2,000 years. Again, you might say that nobody will wait for 2,000 years. But if you have thousands of GPUs, you can do it in days. This is why you should go further and do it for 9 characters, okay? But this is also a bad thing if you forget your password, and if it is like 9 or 10 characters long, nobody can bring it. Maybe you have to wait for years to technology to improve and that you can try all of the passwords, okay? So I will finish it with a single slide where I talk about password hashing. As you can see, we have to hash passwords, but we don't have any standards for it. So people do ad hoc methods, hashing it thousands of times, but what should be that number and so on. We don't have any idea. So password hashing is everywhere, but there wasn't established standard to fulfill the needs of modern applications and to best protect against attackers. For this reason, academicians led by Jean-Philippe Amoson developed a competition, password hashing competition in fall 2012. The web page is here. You can look at the documents and the results. It had received 24 submissions. 9 finalists were announced in December 2014, and in July 2015, Argon 2 announced as the winner. 4 other finalists are received special recognition, like Katena, Lyra 2, Magva, Yescript. So in some of these designs, the authors make it memory intensive so that it is harder to build ASICs to break it. So for this reason, for instance, Lyra 2 is used as the mining algorithm for many alternative cryptocurrencies. Okay, so in even cryptocurrency designers are using these algorithms, but I haven't seen any cybersecurity specialists know these algorithms and use them in their database. But if I were a designer, I would look at Argon to understand it and then use it for password hashing, since it won a competition and nobody found a weakness so far.